The year was 1928. Almost 10 years had passed since the guns of World War I finally fell silent. The war had been unlike anything the world had ever seen before. Trenches stretched across Europe like deep scars in the earth. Cities were destroyed, families were broken, and millions of young soldiers never returned home. The war had ended in 1918, but the memories of the horror were still fresh in the minds of people around the world. In villages, towns, and great cities, mothers still mourned their sons. Soldiers who had survived carried invisible wounds that would never heal. Everyone asked the same question: could such a terrible war ever happen again? For many leaders around the world, the answer had to be no. In the United States, Secretary of State Frank B. Kellogg believed that the world needed a bold new idea to prevent another global catastrophe. Meanwhile, in France, Foreign Minister Aristide was also searching for a way to ensure peace in Europe. France had suffered greatly during the war. Entire towns had been destroyed, and millions of French soldiers had died on the battlefield. The fear of another German invasion still haunted the country. Briand believed that if nations could agree to reject war completely, the world might finally enter a new age of peace. At first, his idea sounded impossible. After all, war had been part of human history for thousands of years. Kings, emperors, and nations had always used armies to solve their problems. But the horrors of World War I had changed how people thought. The world had seen what modern war could do. Machine guns, poison gas, artillery bombardments, and massive armies had turned Europe into a nightmare. More than 16 million people had died, and millions more were wounded. No one wanted to see such destruction again. In 1927, Aristide Briand proposed a peace agreement between France and the United States. His idea was simple but revolutionary. What if countries agreed that war itself should be illegal? Frank B. Kellogg liked the idea, but he believed the agreement should be even bigger. Instead of just two nations promising peace, Kellogg wanted all countries of the world to join. And so, negotiations began. Diplomats from many nations discussed the idea. Some were hopeful, others were skeptical. Many leaders wondered if such a promise could ever truly be kept. But the desire for peace was strong. Finally, on August 27, 1928, representatives from many countries gathered in Paris, one of the great capitals of Europe. There, they signed what became known as the Kellogg-Briand Pact. It was one of the most ambitious treaties in human history. The agreement declared that nations should never again use war as a tool to resolve conflicts. Instead, disputes between countries would be solved through negotiation, diplomacy, and peaceful discussion. At first, 15 countries signed the pact, but soon many more joined. Eventually, over 60 nations became part of the agreement, including powerful countries such as the United States, France, Germany, United Kingdom, and Japan. For a moment, the world felt hopeful. Newspapers celebrated the agreement. Many people believed that humanity had taken a great step toward permanent peace. Some even said that war had finally been abolished forever. But not everyone was convinced. Some critics pointed out a serious problem with the treaty. The pact did not include any punishment for countries that broke the agreement. There was no international police force, no army to enforce the law. If a nation decided to ignore the pact and start a war, there was little the world could do to stop it. Still, people wanted to believe. The memory of the trenches was too painful. The destruction had been too great. The world needed hope. For a few years, it seemed that peace might actually last. But history had other plans. Only a few years later, new tensions began to rise across the globe. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. In 1935, Benito Mussolini ordered Italy to invade Ethiopia. And in 1939, the world would once again be plunged into the chaos of World War II. The Kellogg-Briand Pact had not stopped war. Yet historians still consider the treaty important. Why? Because it changed the way the world thought about war. Before 1928, war had often been considered a normal tool of politics. Countries could attack each other to gain land or power, and it was widely accepted. But the pact introduced a new idea. War itself was wrong, even though the treaty failed to prevent future conflicts. It helped create the modern concept of international law against aggression. In fact, after World War II, the principles of the Kellogg-Briand Pact were used during the Nuremberg trials, where Nazi leaders were prosecuted for starting aggressive wars. The dream of ending war had not succeeded in 1928, but the idea that war should be illegal had begun to shape the future of global politics. Today, nearly a century later, the world still struggles with conflict and violence. Yet the hope that inspired the Kellogg-Briand Pact continues to influence international law and diplomacy. In 1928, for a brief moment, humanity believed that it could end war forever. It was a dream born from the ashes of World War I, a dream that reminds us how deeply people long for peace.